Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Peak Experience. This is the podcast from Peak Support, where we talk about customer experience, the agent experience, and where those two intersect. I'm excited to be here today with my co-host, Jess Elgene. Welcome, Jess.
Hi.
And Jeremy Hyde, who is Director of Customer Service at SunCountry Airlines. Thank you, Jeremy, for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited to talk to Jeremy today, not only because I used to live in Minnesota, so I've traveled a lot on SunCountry Airlines, but also because Jeremy is going to talk about how they reduced attrition dramatically at SunCountry Airlines using a variety of strategies, including staffing strategies, using part-time agents, as well as employee engagement. So I'm really excited to get into all of that with Jeremy today. So Jeremy, to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about SunCountry Airlines and about your support team?
Sure. Yeah, so SunCountry Airlines, we're based out of Minneapolis. We are, I would say, regionally focused. We take a lot of Minnesotans to warm, sunny destinations when it's cold and snowy here. But of course, we have to be able to take people places outside of just February and March and such as well. So just the different places that people want to go, very, very Minneapolis focused. We're the 11th largest carrier in the US. Been around for 40 years. In most recent years, we've kind of gone through a process to adjust the business model and kind of find this sweet spot where we're a little bit premium to other low-cost carriers, but not quite, what some of the legacy carriers are and try to be. So we try to find this space where we can make travel accessible to people from a price perspective. But again, the product offering, I think most would consider to be slightly premium to some of the other low-cost carriers that you might think about. So my team, the customer service team, we kind of focus on a few different parts of the customer journey. So there's kind of the pre-travel, maybe you need to make a booking and we can help with that if you choose not to book on the web. There's kind of mid-travel, you're at the airport and perhaps something has gone wrong. And then post-travel, could be a myriad of things that maybe you need to work with us on after traveling. But the largest kind of group within customer service is our contact center, our reservation agents that are really focused on, helping our customers. Majority of what we're doing is helping people with existing bookings, and they want to make a change, an adjustment. They want to add something, remove something, that sort of thing. But we have folks that deal with regulated complaints. Maybe it comes from the customer themselves or through the DOT. Maybe it's a Better Business Bureau complaint. And then we have some operationally focused individuals. So if you're going to miss a connection, for example, in real time, we're trying to figure out what we need to do to help you along the way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah. And can you talk about what is SunCountry's approach to customer support? So we hear about some low-cost airlines that are shutting down phone support. Obviously, others try to opt for a more premium experience. What are you trying to do with SunCountry?
Yeah, I mean, we try to really make the travel experience simple. And so, that's definitely a big part of kind of the service DNA, but while also keeping in mind that, cost sensitivity is an aspect of our customers. And so we have to be thoughtful about that as well. We are almost entirely phone at the moment. I would say in the future, you can expect us to add channels that we think make sense for our customers and for us, with both customer experience and, cost and efficiency in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, you had some very high attrition numbers. Talk a little bit about what was happening then and, what happened when you decided to say, okay, how can we fix this?
Yeah. So COVID hit and nobody wanted to leave their job, right? Like things were going wild. Lots of layoffs were happening. There were businesses that were closing their doors. So there was a period of time in the beginning of the pandemic where our attrition was basically zero. I mean, truly nobody was going. We're like, oh, that's great. then as we started to see some shift in what was happening through the pandemic and for businesses, all of a sudden the economy took off and everybody was hiring. And I think across the US, and I'm sure the world, but the US especially, suddenly it's like nobody could keep anyone. Nobody could find anyone. Nobody could keep anyone. The demand of customers and the demand of business had skyrocketed. And so things changed very quickly. I don't know that it was unique to us, but I can say I've never seen attrition like we were experiencing at that point in time. I'll add that, that beginning part of the pandemic when nobody was leaving was very difficult. And again, not just on us, but as an airline, I can say, we were in an industry that was uniquely impacted. And so I think when people started to see things changing, for a lot of reasons, following the stress of what we had just been through for the 9 to 12 months preceding that, people were ready to make a change.
Yeah. So I know you've done a lot of things to really improve that attrition number. Why don't we talk about start with your use of part-time and talk about how part-time has fit into your strategy and how you've increased it and used it successfully.
Yeah, I love our part-time program. I think internally there was some kind of question marks about how well it would work, and it blew all of our expectations away. In the beginning, the part-time program was not about attrition. The part-time program was about these peaks and valleys in our demand that were almost impossible to meet effectively with full-time shifts. We would end up understaffed, overstaffed, understaffed, that sort of thing, just by nature of 8 to 10 hour shifts and by nature of how our volume came in. And so we started having these conversations. Man, if we had some like 4-hour shifts or 5-hour shifts, we could just kind of drop them right where we need them, smooth this entire thing out. When we were having those conversations, we had 1 or 2 part-time employees. And that was because they were full-time employees that came to us and said, look, either I can go part-time or I'm going to quit. And so we were able to accommodate some part-time schedules. But so then we started to kind of shift and say, like, all right, what would this look like if we built it out? What would the expectations be? How would we schedule them? All that, And so we built and we grew the part-time program. And as we did that and we were watching attrition, we realized our part-time attrition was a fraction of what our full-time was. So that was just kind of this lucky thing that happened. We didn't plan for it. We didn't say, we know that part-time program will be a solution to our attrition problem. It was a solution to a different problem.
Yeah.
But because we were monitoring the 2 types of employees, we were able to see the stark contrast in attrition rates.
Yeah, and talk a little bit more about the part-time program for folks who might be interested, either for attrition reasons or to cover those peaks and valleys. How does it work? How many part-time folks do you have? How do you administer it? And how do the agents like it?
Sure. Yeah. So there's been tweaks along the way. Before we launched the part-time program, I went out onto LinkedIn to my community and I said, hey, if you've done this before, I would love to talk to you. Here's some of the things I'm thinking about, but you've done it. Like, tell me, what are the pitfalls? What are the things that I need to be thinking about? So through that feedback, I think it gave us a pretty good base, but then we had to go out and kind of prove the theory. But basically the way that the program works, we have kind of these buckets of shifts that people can be hired into or move into. So it's like, there's the morning part-time people, the midday, and the evening. When we started out, it was just nights and weekends. That's where we started the program. And then over time we went, oh shoot, we actually have too many people nights and weekends. We need to start getting some part-time people in other places. But so you kind of know these are the sorts of hours that I would be expected to work. It's not that those are the only hours you're allowed to work, but the majority of your hours will fall within kind of that time frame. We asked for a certain amount of availability. And then we ask for the number of hours that you're willing to work per week. The minimum is 15. You have to give us at least, that. But you could get up to like 28 or so hours per week. And so then every week we schedule 3 weeks out, and it's based on the need of the business and the availability of the individuals. And so because of that, I mean, there's a lot of talk about flexibility. Things have changed a lot over the last few years in terms of employee expectations, and flexibility and having a schedule that works with their personal life
Yeah.
is deeply important to people.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
so, I'll say, like, there are things that people don't always love about the program, but generally speaking, people like it because they give us
Yeah.
their availability. We say, here's the criteria, you give us the availability, and then we schedule based on that. And so, yeah, it's worked really, really well. Again, the attrition is really low. It's become this great lever as well. You know, if you're only working 15, 16, 17 hours a week, there are probably weeks that you would be okay on a 1 week basis to work more.
Yeah.
Or you might be willing to work less. And so there's a lot of seasonality for us. Again, the March and April, spring break in Minnesota, everybody's trying to go to Mexico and the islands and that sort of thing, right? So you can imagine the seasonal demand is really, really high. May, right after spring break, when the snow's starting to melt and
right.
Nobody wants to go anywhere.
May in Minnesota is amazing. I can testify to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. But so we have this big, big demand and then this valley that drops.
Right.
And so we try to kind of communicate in advance to let people understand the seasonality and let them know, hey, if you're willing to work less, or like this last May, we said, hey, if you want to take anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks off in May, let us know. And a bunch of people took us up on that. So we could reduce the head count to match the demand. So it's just like this incredible program that, again, when we first were thinking about it, we saw some of the potential. And it's become so much more.
Yeah. And how do you manage it internally? Are you using software? I mean, that's a lot, that's a lot of criteria and a lot of schedules to manage. How do you do it?
Yeah. And, I forgot to answer one of the questions that you asked up front, but roughly 85% of our agents are part-time.
Oh, so, wow. That high.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So scheduling until earlier this year, I mean, we have a WFM system where we house our schedules and all of that. We were on a really, really old one until this year. And the scheduling was done almost 100% manually. So I will say, if there's someone out there that doesn't have an expensive tool to do, it's possible to do it.
Yeah.
It's painful. You'll have to throw some people resources at it. But I mean, even that, it might be a person that's like dedicated, or 75% of their time is dedicated. If you can manage unneeded waste out of your program, then dedicating a body to that, it makes a lot of sense. But we got into
most people with a phone support program of your size are likely to have WFM software already in place. And if the team is smaller, if it's a 10, 20 person team, then it's easier to manage manually.
Totally. Yeah, no, you're right. But yeah, so we upgraded our WFM system though, which has been really nice. It's much less manual. I would say what we do now is we let the system take the first run at it, and then we adjust things that we don't think make sense. But that's where, before it was like everybody kind of had to work the same amount of hours because, Susie couldn't possibly manage all of those different preferences. But now we load the preferences in. So again, it's my preference is to work 20 hours a week, and I'm okay working 4 shifts a week. Okay, cool. The system can handle all of those preferences. So yeah, the system takes the first run at it. And then we take a look and we go, I'm going to make some adjustments, and then we push it out.
Yeah. And now remote work is pretty critical to this as well, because people are going to be less likely to commute to an office for a 4-hour shift. So talk about your shift. I know you were always doing some remote work, but talk about your approach to remote versus in-office work and that shift and how that's impacted your staffing and employees.
Yeah. So pre-pandemic, we were on this path to be 100% remote. It was already happening. And a big part of that, like, people are going to be sick of hearing me talk about snow in Minnesota, but it's a thing.
Yeah. Snow in Minnesota, traffic in Manila. I mean, there's lots of reasons why it's easier to stay home.
Absolutely. So what really started us on that path, though, was when it snows in Minnesota. For us, there's a couple things that happen. One, it impacts our flight schedule significantly. And
Mhm.
two, it impacts people's ability or willingness to drive into the office to
Right,
support the
right.
people that are impacted by those flight
Perfect
disruptions.
storm.
It's like the two things that do not go well together. And so that's what really started it. We were about 60% of our contact center team members were working from home pre-pandemic. The pandemic hit, and then it just sped things up, and within about a week or two, everybody was remote at that point. And so, yeah, so we have, on those wintry days, we have less callouts, as you would probably imagine. Definitely
Yeah.
less people showing up late. The other thing, between being remote and then having a lot of part-time employees, if we have a day like that, we can call people that aren't scheduled in to work if they're interested and willing. We have a program that'll send a text message out and say, hey, if you want to pick up some hours, we would love your assistance. And so all of a sudden we can go from our baseline up to sometimes flexing up as much as 50% just because our team
Mhm.
members are willing to hop on for a little bit to help
Right,
out
right,
if
right.
there's a situation like that that's happening.
Yeah. And you're not hiring anywhere, right? You're not hiring anywhere in the United States. You've still got a regional focus.
We do. So there are some states where we just don't hire at all and just won't consider you. But when we were when we were thinking about where we wanted to be hiring, up until a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was Minneapolis, St. Paul area again, because we were physically here and physically hiring to begin with. But then as we were shifting to the remote workforce, um, over the last couple of years, Minneapolis specifically has had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. And so, that poses challenges, obviously. To go along with that, there's been extreme wage pressure within Minneapolis and just really high competition. And so a lot of the issues that you hear people talking about with ghosting and no shows and, people jumping for $2 more at this other place and, that sort of thing, like it just was a market that was not treating us well. We just knew that, this wasn't probably the best market where we could be. So we went and we analyzed a bunch of different places across the US. And so we considered places like Dallas and Phoenix and Southern Florida and that sort of thing. But we also took a really close look at some of the Midwest and Upper Midwest specifically areas. Being an Upper Midwest company where our brand is really, really strong,
Yeah.
and a place where you get flight benefits, which means you should be near an airport that we
Right,
serve to take advantage of said flight benefits. We knew
right.
that we probably wanted to be in this upper Midwest area. And so we went and we looked at unemployment rates and education levels, and of course, internet and all of those sorts of things. And we identified 4 markets specifically, all upper Midwest, that we thought would be good for us based on those things, plus proximity to an airport that we serve or proximity to the Minneapolis St. Paul airport. And then we honed in on one. And so rather than just posting on Indeed and like hoping for the best,
Mhm.
the team has gone out and done job fairs and such in this specific area. We're kind of sort of about a 50-mile radius within a smaller town in the upper Midwest that we focus on. But we knew that like that's where we wanted to try and recruit from. We didn't
Mhm.
just want to pray and hope. So we tried to build our employment brand there. And then we did have this stroke of luck. Um, the local airport had a legacy airline that decided to pull out of that market. And that left people locally that were already working in the airline business looking for work. And
Right,
that timing was like right when we were trying to
right,
get
right,
into that
right.
market. So
Yeah.
again, like sometimes it's better to be lucky than to be good, right? So
Yeah, yeah. No, but it's interesting, but you were very strategic about it. And I love that approach of going remote, but really strategically choosing where you want to be so that you can actually build up your brand as an employer in that location, take advantage of the referrals in that location.
exactly. Yeah. And so now not only do we track attrition by full-time and part-time, but we also track it by location. So are you in the Twin Cities metro area, the Minneapolis, St. Paul? Are you in greater Minnesota? Are you in, this other market, or are you in other places? And this market that we've identified always beats out all of the other markets when it comes to attrition. So thus far, the theory has proven to be correct. What I love though is if something changes, we are not physically bound there. We can up and leave. Like I said, I have at least 3 markets that I think would be good for us that we could just do the same thing. Go and like, all right, work with the local, government workforce center or whatever, do a job fair, get in the Facebook community pages, but go and be very thoughtful about where we want to be and start to build up that brand in a new location if that's ever necessary.
I'm curious about how the introduction of a part-time program has impacted team members' affinity for the organization. How do you get 100% commitment to the brand with 50% of someone's time?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I always say like I never want to be somebody's second job. We are a lot of people's second jobs though. It's not my preference though, because I'm always going to lose out to the full-time job if push comes to shove. But actually, we have a lot of people returning to the workforce for one reason or another that don't want to work full-time. So it could be someone that maybe is semi-retired, or they were out on parental leave for a while taking care of kids, and now the kids are in school and they're looking for something to do just during certain hours of the day. So a lot of people, I think because of that, because of how it can fit to their unique kind of wants and needs, they love it. And I will say, like, credit to our workforce team because they work really hard to make sure we're balancing between the needs of the business and kind of the wants and needs of the individuals. If we just say it's our way or the highway, well, like, we know what'll happen. People will leave. And so we often will get compliments from these part-time employees about how the workforce team is willing to work with them and at least understand and consider kind of their wants and needs and perspective and that sort of thing. So yeah, and then I will say, like, I think that a lot of the stuff that we do around employee engagement and employee satisfaction is another piece to that. And again, we will sometimes get compliments from people. I've never worked at a place like this. I've never worked at a place that has done ABC, that gives us a voice the way that you do. Luckily for us, like, a lot of places don't set the bar very high. And so frankly, like, just trying and people are amazed. Like, oh my gosh, you actually care about us enough to like hear us out and listen to us. But that is when we realized that our attrition was horrific and we would never be able to manage our business the way that it was going. We really, really made an effort to focus on those things and create that voice for our team members and make sure that they have access to leaders and all of that. And so that's probably another big part of it.
Awesome. And you mentioned that there are kind of 3 buckets that customer service tickets fall into: pre-travel, mid-travel, and post-travel. And I'm sure there's a sense of urgency from the customer on every single one of these, but I do wonder about how prioritization is, kind of done, and if team members are trained up primarily to handle one of the 3 or all 3, and what's the approach to those 3 different categories?
Yeah, we're generally loosely organized around those 3. And so for example, post-travel tends to be a complaint or a need for some sort of action. And so, it could be a complaint. It could be, I need reimbursement for a charge that I think that you guys should be responsible for, or, something to that effect. But so we organize our team members, again, loosely around those 3 to help with what you're talking about, which is focus. And so making sure that we're not trying to be all things to all people. The contact center, the reservation folks, they're a little bit pre-travel, a lot, well, I should say a good amount pre-travel, but a lot kind of mid-travel as well. They're kind of our firefighters. It's just like whatever is trending for the day, week, month, like, they're on it. But then we even do have some specialization on mid-travel. So like I mentioned, a misconnection, for example. Real-time issues are often a disruption, a delay, a cancel, a misconnection, that sort of thing. So we do have a group of individuals that really is specialized and focused on that. That's pulled out even from the contact center agents. And so what that looks like to the customer, I mean, the customer wouldn't necessarily know that, but the contact center agents are focused on the customer and that individual and their specific needs. But we have this team of individuals that's like all of the administrative things that need to be happening, trying to figure out, okay, if there was another flight, what is it? How do we get them on it? Like they're doing that stuff kind of in the background. And then they're kind of backing up the contact center or the reservations agents, so that they can just kind of move quickly according to the needs of the customers. So we try to have a bit of loose arrangement that way. And then recently really focusing on putting power into the hands of the customer themselves so that they're not reliant on any of us. So again, to that point, if there's a disruption, there's a delay, there's some sort of change to your schedule, allowing the web to make any changes that you would be otherwise requesting us to make. And it's very scenario based. It's like if you have a 20-minute delay, like just wait the 20 minutes. We're not going to do anything special for you in that case. But if you have a 12-hour delay, now that opens up a different set of options for you. And historically, that's been a very people-powered resolution. Call us, let's talk about it, and we'll resolve it for you. But the technology can help to support these, right? And the system can tell if you have a 12-hour delay. And so that's been another big piece of things is let people help themselves to the extent possible. Those that can't or don't want to, we're still here to help.
So yeah, and following up on that, are you incorporating artificial intelligence at all, or are you thinking about incorporating it to increase that ability for self-service?
Yeah, I mean, to this point, the things that we have been implementing really don't require artificial intelligence, to be honest. There was some solutions that were simpler and didn't require that we've been able to deploy. So yeah. We've been able to make some pretty significant improvements to the customer experience without that. Thinking about it though, yeah, I mean, always, it's all a prioritization. And I'm sure you go through this as well, Hannah. It's like, all right, we've got a list of 100 things that we could do. What's the cost versus the benefit? And I would say for the most part, because we had some simpler solutions that we could deploy, lower cost and potentially higher value. So that's kind of where we're at. I think as we continue to drill down and become more and more efficient, then we're going to have to turn to that sort of thing. So there's a handful, we're having conversations. So, and trying, like there's a particular use case, for example, that isn't quite a break even as of now. However, we know that there's some pricing things that could be coming down the pike that would change that. And all of a sudden it would go from a not quite break even to having an actual ROI. And so I think right now it's stringing together enough use cases, leveraging the same tools, so that you can justify the expense.
Well, we always talk to clients, you have to optimize your current system before adding another layer of artificial intelligence. And there's so much automation potential in existing customer support platforms that you don't even need artificial intelligence for. So use that before you add that layer of artificial intelligence. Otherwise, you're kind of adding really more technology than you need, and it's probably going to cost you more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if we had spent the last year or two trying to deploy, some artificial intelligence, or the last 6 months trying to deploy a ChatGPT powered bot or something like that, it would not have paid off the way that we would want it to, versus these other things that we prioritized ahead of it. So as much as ChatGPT and these large language models are really cool and wild and fascinating and truly can be leveraged, that's just not where we're at the moment.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about employee engagement and all of the things that you've been doing there.
Yeah. Take a quick drink here.
Yes, feel free to hydration station, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah, so employee satisfaction. So as I said, the focus there really started when we realized how bad our attrition was. Now, that's not to say that we didn't care about our employees prior to that. I will say, however, though, and I've mentioned this in some other conversations with folks that people maybe have heard me talk about. During that first 9 to 12 months of the pandemic, when things were really, really rough, um, we were not taking care of our team members as well as we could have been. Not intentionally, but I think all of the weight and the stress that all of us were feeling through all of that, and then adding, in the Minneapolis area, we had George Floyd stuff going on and everything. Like things were heavy and people were struggling, and like me too, Um, so we were not supporting our team members the way that they needed us to support them for a while there, unfortunately. We realized that later than I would have liked to. And obviously the attrition was like a big indicator, like people were leaving at a really high rate. So we wanted to be able to understand what was driving it beyond the obvious. It's like, all right, fix the things that we know we need to be doing better. When we kind of realized that we needed to improve the employee experience, employee satisfaction, that needed to be a big part of keeping people around. One of the first things that we did was we kicked off an employee satisfaction survey. That was a key tool to understand what were the concerns that were trending. And so kind of our process through that, it's collecting the data through a survey is kind of the easy part. It's what you do after that that really matters, in my opinion. So do the survey, collect the data, analyze it, understand what is trending so you can identify potential focus areas. For us, it's kind of a balance of, not biting off more than we can chew, making sure it's things that we can control or influence sufficiently. But once we identify those focus areas, then, all right, what are the specific commitments that we're going to make around those focus areas? And who is the person from a leadership team perspective that's going to be responsible for making sure that stuff happens? So we put all that together, we publish that out, create visibility around it. And so it kind of becomes this, you said we need to do this, and so we've done that, or you've said this is a challenge, and so this is the thing that we've put into place as a result of that. So that's been a big kind of part of what we do and how we identify the concerns of the team member. One of the other things that's been really,
What were some of the big challenges? What were sort of the biggest challenges that you saw, and what were the solutions that you put in place?
Like there was scheduling stuff, for example. So we talked about the part-time program and how important that was. Well, when we started off, the minimum required hours per week was 20. And often people were working 4 days per week, 20 hours per week. And for someone who wants to work part-time, or for many people that want to work part-time, that was a larger commitment than what they wanted to make. So it was things of that nature that we were able to kind of trend out. There are other things that are really obvious. So I talked earlier about disruptions. As you can imagine, talking to somebody that's had a flight cancellation or a flight delay, not the most popular or the most fun conversation from our agent's perspective.
Right.
Now, I can't make sure that every single flight runs on time, but how do we make that better? How do we make that experience better? How do we make the tools available to our team members better? So it's those sorts of things. Again, thinking about what do you have control or influence over, where you can make the biggest gains. But things of that nature have come up.
How do you improve that? Yeah, I mean, just thinking about that has a lot of relevance for a lot of companies where there are certain call types that are very stressful. What did you do to improve that for the agents?
I mean, a big part of what we've done over the last year, this year specifically, is technology focused and bringing the experience into the 21st century. So, if you, for example, if there's an overnight delay that we're responsible for, so it's not weather, but it's, our crew member was sick or something like that. If we're going to provide hotels and meals, the way that we facilitate that. It was really clunky before. There was a lot of manual things that were going on. There's paper vouchers in some cases and that sort of thing. And so, you get a line of 200 passengers in a gate area
Yeah.
that can't hear the announcements, or
Mhm.
maybe they went to go and get food, and by the time they came back,
Mhm.
nobody was there, and now they're calling and we're trying to figure out. So stuff like that, that's all digital at this point. So we're going to send you an email or a text message. Do you need a hotel and or
Yeah.
meal?
Yeah.
And so it's things like that. Or like I had mentioned, I
Yeah.
think before, you know, if you want to change your flight as a result of a time change on it or a delay or something like that,
Mhm.
allowing you to do that yourself if you so choose.
Yeah.
Those are the sorts of things that we put in place to try and help, less volatility, less spikes.
So improving
And
the customer experience, basically, improving the customer experience. And that reduces the volume, but also reduces the stress when the customers are calling
Yeah.
into the agent because they've been able to manage things on their own.
Absolutely. And then where we can, empowering folks, I will say there's, like many centers out there, there's a lot of kind of that I need to check with somebody else to see if I have permission to do this thing.
Mm.
With empowerment, I think, again, there's balance is a word that I use a lot, and I think it's really, really important in life, professionally and personally. There's this balance to strike when it comes to empowerment. It's often not appropriate to just tell everyone that they can make their own decision if they think it's what's best for the customer. Some people might argue with me, but you're going to have a really inconsistent customer experience, right? Hannah's really nice and she wants to take care of the customer and give them whatever they're asking for. And Jeremy's really mean and he's going to make a different decision. That's not the scenario that you want to find yourself in.
Right.
So our approach around even like empowerment is, if we come up with an idea, making sure we have the right kind of guardrails and kind of rules in place, but then piloting it to see if it worked. So we've been doing one recently, actually. We did a 50-day pilot. We analyzed. We didn't like the results. Recalibrated, made some adjustments, and now we're in a second 50-day pilot period with about 15 people rather than rolling something out. And I'll say a lot of teams I've been in the past would have said, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Let's do it.
Right.
All of a sudden, 6 months later, you're rolling it back and you lose the trust of your team. You kind of look stupid, right? Like, oh, you said we were going to do this thing. It blew up in your face and now you're backpedaling.
Yeah.
And so try to be careful about that, but still show like we're trying to bring things forward for you, but we want to do it responsibly.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, we really appreciate your time. It's been great having you on the podcast. And anything else that you would add?
Find me on LinkedIn, and
Yes.
I love to interact with folks and share ideas and debate topics. So find me out there.
Absolutely. Everyone should follow Jeremy Hyde on LinkedIn. He is one of the better influencers in the CX space. So definitely encourage that, and we'll include the link in the description as well. Thank you so much, Jeremy Hyde.